Really, it's all about the unemployment numbers, man. There's just so many great people that you meet that are out there, and they're either in transition or they're looking for their next gig, or they've been unemployed for a while. And these aren't bad people. They're not retarded people. These are really good people.
And the other thing is that it's taking companies a really long time to pull the trigger.
Yeah,
and you got to have every friggin' thing that they're looking for, every requirement, every piece of that background, every degree, every whatever. You got to have it. Welcome to a career transition podcast on Total Picture Radio. This is Peter Clayton reporting. Today's show is brought to you by Jobs and Pods, the only podcast where real employers and real recruiters talk about their jobs and how to get them. Visit jobsandpods.com to learn more. I met William Tincup at HCI's 2010 National Summit in Tucson, Arizona this spring. He had set up shop in the exhibitors hall and positioned in a strategic location where he could scan the activity taking place on the show floor. I gave him my business card. He gave me his book. Black cover, picture of a brown paper lunch bag. Flames are shooting from the top of the lunch bag. Below the Star Tincup logo is the title, Try Not to F-U Burn Mark K this up, but if you do, call us. I was sold and curious at the same time. William, who are your clients, I asked. He smiled, paused, and said, look around the room. We're at HCI's marquee event here, and the room is filled with vendors you'd expect to see at an HR conference. I wondered if they had read William's book. Well, you know what? William is on Total Picture Radio today, and we are going to be talking about career transition because that's what he just went through. And we're also going to be talking about jobs and recruiting and the economy, and starting off here with the fact that things are looking up. Here's William.
This is always the way in the recruiting and staffing world, that the moment you know that that you can tell that we're actually coming back is the moment that the staffing firms start to staff up. And when recruiting fees, you see a spike in recruiting fees.
Right.
Because a lot of people will go into a mode out of a recession and they'll say, yeah, we're not going to pay recruiting fees. They'll just shut it down. It doesn't matter if you're a great recruiter or you've got a great candidate pipeline or you're segmented, you have all that stuff. They'll just say no fees. I mean, it comes out of the financial, the CFO or the financial department. So just say no fees.
It's the bean counters who don't really stop and think about building a talent pipeline and what that really means long term for the organization, and what is the implication of the fact that they're not going to pay any fees? What does that mean as far as their recruiting efforts? I mean, they don't think about that. They only say, we're not going to spend this 20%.
Yeah, the moment that they can't hire the gal or the guy, that's the moment where they go out and they try to hit the director of marketing or the VP of whatever, and they can't hire the guy. Like right now, what you were talking about is they've got so many criteria or so much criteria around, specialized degree and experience. I had to work with the CIA and, all this crazy stuff.
Right.
Needs to, have an understanding of Portuguese, whatever.
iPhone and Android programming experience.
yeah, exactly. So they have all this outrageous criteria really as a screen out. And then they'll start to loosen the criteria, and then all of a sudden it's at a moment where somebody realizes, it doesn't matter how we loosen the criteria. We can't find that person. That gal or guy is already employed, they're already engaged, and they're not leaving.
Right.
That's the moment that the trigger, you flip the switch, and all of a sudden recruiting starts to kind of feel it. And you'll see it in the blogs, and you'll see it, in the trade shows, and ERE and specialized events like that will be really massive because recruiters are back in business. And actually, I was talking to a recruiter the other day, and she said something really interesting. She said, you know what, candidates and recruiters are going to remember this. They're going to remember this time period because of the lack of grace that employers have used with them. They're going to remember this. There's going to be a moment where it's like, yeah, I remember applying. I remember interacting with you. Yeah.
And you were assholes.
Yeah.
And I don't forget that.
No. You could if you don't have the best recruiters in the business will tell you the way that they've made it, through this part of the recession or whatever, is they still communicate with people. They still communicate on the business development side, and they still communicate with candidates. They're still proactive with their candidate pool and saying, you know what, I don't have anything right now. Let me keep my eyes open. If I find something, I'll get you on the phone. I'll hit you with an email. They're communicative, and you know what? It's humane. I mean, if you're looking for a job, there's nothing more frustrating than putting yourself out there and nonstop rejection, right. Nonstop, or even worse, just no communication, just nothing. You just put it out there and nothing comes back to you. But
William, if you're sitting on those job boards and applying on those job boards, I mean, that you might as well be in Las Vegas, spinning that, pulling down that arm on that slot machine. You've got about as much chance.
Yeah. What do you think about the number 7, 12?
Yeah.
I like odd, and give me 1 through 25. Yeah.
That's not the way to do it, folks.
No, I think going out there and building some type of personalized brand and building, if you use this moment as if you're looking at the career transition part and you say to yourself, you know what, this is a good moment, let me rebuild. Let me no one's going to be hiring anyhow. I mean, if you were to take this all the way back to, let's say, the latter part of '08 or beginning of '09, and let's say you had the objective, overview of saying, you know what, the landscape looks like this. We just came out of, an election, new office. We're going to be in kind of the muck for a little while. No one's going to be hiring. I think I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to go back and get that certification. I'm going to go back and do some type of, this is a moment of career transition, real career transition, whereas I actually kind of put a bookend on what I used to do, and now I start a new chapter and I go in a different direction. It's hard for people, I think, probably anywhere after the age of maybe 30, 35 years old, because they've already got a lot invested in family, house, cars, kids in school, stuff, bills, debt, all that type stuff. And I think that's one of the natural barriers to career transition. And you can't change gears. Even though you have the desire to do something different with your life, you just financially you can't. You still have to go out and market yourself as what your experience says you were. What's really difficult about that is when no one's hiring, you've now got the pressures, the family pressures, and the financial pressures on top of that. So, I mean, I feel for everybody that's looking for a job right now, and I know it's not easy on any side of this. Right. It's not easy for HR. It's not easy for recruiters. It's not easy for anybody. And stated and covered. I think as you work both sides of that desk when you're hiring or trying to be hired, there's just a humane way of going about it. And I think if we can kind of remember the humanity of it all, then, we'll make it through this. I mean, I remember a business professor of mine saying, you know what, here's the deal. You guys are young, and I love you, but about every 7 or 8 years, it's going to feel like, the Great Depression has hit you. So just get ready for it. You got about 8 of them to look forward to. And you know what? Just come to grips with this. And that, there's booms, there's busts, and maybe the peaks aren't as high for some, and maybe the valleys aren't as low for others. But there's peaks and valleys. You need to come to grips with that, and I don't think most Americans really kind of they don't know that. They're just probably just looking at it as it's really terrible now. How long? When will we reach the bottom? It's like, if anyone could ever predict when you would reach the bottom or when we would actually peak out, I'd like to bottle that up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, speaking about career transition, William, here's a good segue.
Yeah.
You left the company you co-founded 10 years ago, Tincup. The title of the email I received was On to the Next One.
Yep.
So let's talk about that, and let's start out by dispensing with some of the standard stuff, like the why you left. And, I know Tincup is doing very well. I got a press release from your former partner, Brett Starr, announcing 4 new partners. So, just give us a synopsis of what's happening and why you decided to transition into this new role you're doing.
Sure, sure. Most amicable business partnership split ever, I would tell you. And you know, the reason that I can say that is, I think I learned this back years ago when I was at Walmart. And you want the business, you want the store to run better when you're not there than when you are there. And the reason for that is because you don't want to have to be the person that has to be there to hold it all together. But most managers and most leaders don't get that. They want to be the hub that holds it all together, and that if they leave, somehow it'll all fall apart. And I think only douchebags want their former firms to fall apart in their absence. And I'm definitely not a douchebag. I love my business partner, former business partner, Brad. We've worked together for 7 years. I started the firm 10 years ago, and I think it was just one of those deals. We had a great business, and when you have a great business with two guys running the helm, it's like, you know what? Pick one. Let one guy actually run it and create vision for the future, and let the other guy go do something else. And I'd been there longer, and I had actually come to, probably the last couple months, I'd actually fallen out of love with the business model. And I on my website, I literally I lay it out there for everybody, for God and everybody to see that, I loved it when we started. I love the people. Oh my God, the employee base and all the four partners that have been promoted. Brett, it's an engaging. When you're working with smart people, it was exciting to come to work. It was never really work, I guess. But the stuff that we did, outsourced marketing services, I kind of fell out of love with it. Email marketing and web design and even building great brands and stuff like that. I just kind of, I probably really what came to me is I'd done it for 10 years. And at one point, I just had another child in November, and I think I probably just kind of looked at my life and said, "Is this it? Is this all? I'm 41. Is this is this what I'm meant to do? Is this it?" And I wanted more. And even though, I'll tell you, Peter, I went through a sales. I think any salesperson, depending on where they sell, price wise, I went through a hit streak like nobody's business. In February alone, I closed a deal a day. A deal a day. Yeah. I'm a hit streak, and I still wasn't happy. Most people would have been, ecstatic with something like that. I wasn't. So I knew something. Something in the back of my mind was still kind of gnawing at me. And, I think it's funny. It all played out really fast and very gracefully, I would tell you. Brett went to Mexico for vacation in early June, and he came back from vacation, and we have our normal board meetings. We sit down and pour through the financials and the pipeline and, and all the clients and what's going on and stuff. We really kind of analyze the business. And, before we even started, Brett goes, before we dig into all the normal stuff, what about us? How are we doing? We have basically the same company that we had 5 years ago. What about us? And what was nice about that moment is we didn't dig into the tactical. We didn't dig into the normal, everyday, okay, career transition, this guy, or what do we need to do on payroll for this gal, etc. We actually just started talking about us and how we work together, and what does our partnership look like, and it's funny because we got up on the wipe off board and we said, what if one of us were to ever leave? And at that point, it was all hypothetical. We weren't talking about Brett leaving or me leaving. We were just talking hypothetically. We said, what if one of us left? What would it look like? And then we modeled that, and we said, well, neither of us are sitting on, millions of dollars. We would have to use the money from the firm to actually, make the buyout happen. So what would that look like? And we modeled that on the wipe-off board, and that all took probably 20 minutes. And we sat down, and he goes, well, what do you think? And I looked at him with extreme moment of clarity. I said, I think I want to leave. He looked at me and he said, okay, all right. Well, let's figure that out. And we had already done the hard stuff. I mean, the attorneys, Brett obviously had an attorney, I had an attorney, we had an attorney for both of us. We did that deal, a business partnership agreement, a buyout agreement, a promissory note. We did that deal in 9 days.
That's amazing.
Yeah, my attorney. When I was talking to my attorney, at one point he points over to a stack over in the corner, and he goes, "You see that stack of paper over there?" And it's about a foot and a half high. And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He goes, "That's a partnership agreement that I've been working on for 8 months." He goes, "You guys are making this happen too fast. We'll give it 30 days.
Right.
Give it 90
You're
days."
a cheap date there.
Yeah, it was a real cheap date. But you know what? Extremely gracefully, and I think that's what happens when you have two guys that actually like each other. I want Start Tincup to go on and be as big and as successful as humanly possible. And I'll do anything to promote that. I care deeply about the people and what they're doing. I just needed to do something different. Brett allowed me to gracefully exit the business, and I took a month off and smoked a lot of cigars and drank a lot of scotch, and I really disconnected from the business. And I'll tell you, Peter, for the first time in probably 11 years, I didn't think about the business. I thought about me and what I wanted to do. I can't remember a moment actually where I just thought selfishly, well, what do I want? I mean, not how do we need to innovate the business, or how do we need to, do something with the business, but well, what the hell do I want out of this? What do I want out of life? That was both refreshing and daunting, I would tell you. That wasn't easy to just think about myself, because I hadn't exercised that muscle in a long time. I'd been thinking about the business, and it was a nice exercise, I would tell you.
Okay, so what's the next act?
Well, one thing that I enjoy, and I enjoy conversations, and I would tell you that there's three prongs to this. The people that I've been selling to for the last 2 years are basically the C-suite and the marketers of products and services into HR. So you take HR as a big giant silo, let's say, and that's different types of positions, of course. There's a ton of different people that sell into HR, from payroll to time and attendance to outsourced recruiting. There's just all these different it's a fun market of people that sell into HR. Well, I'd been talking to the executives as well as the marketers of these firms. And what I really got energy out of was just being on the phone and talking to them. That's what I got them. I mean, the sales part, hey, how do we work together stuff was, obviously how the business, got its revenue and a source of income and all that other stuff. But what I got the most energy out of was just talking to people, playing off the conversation, and then giving them the best advice I could, and that was that. So what I've done is I created a model where it's kind of like an advice on demand model, where I can interact with some of the same exact people, but I'm also broadening that out to HR, because I believe a lot of the senior HR executives, as it relates to employee communications or internal communications, could use the sounding board or advice of a marketer from time to time. Not a full-on model where I deliver the actual communication stuff, if you will. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be in the stuff business. I don't want to be in the deliverables business. I don't want to have a series or a bunch of employees or contractors or subcontractors. I kind of go back to ancient Rome or ancient Greek and Greece, and there was doers and thinkers, and I don't want to do the stuff. At 40, almost 42, I want to be out of the doing business. I want to just think, give people the best advice I can, and then let them source the project however they want to source it. If they want to internally source it, or do it themselves, or source it with a different group, great. So if you look at it as the three-prong, one is I'll probably be talking to a lot of the same people that I was already talking to. Either prospects or former clients or current clients of Start Tincup. I probably, but now I'll just be talking to them for an hour. It's a straight hourly rate. It's really easy for them to buy, and there's nothing else. I have no additional services to deliver to them. So there's no issues of whether or not I would compete or any of those types of things.
So there's no non-compete agreement that you have?
No, Not at all. There's no non-compete, non-disclosure, non-solicitation. And I once again, I want Start Tincup to do well. I don't want to be in the outsourced marketing business ever again. I've done it. I believe I've got the merit badge. I don't want to do it again. I just want to be. I like the energy of a good conversation. The last thing is what I'm most excited about is what's called, or what I've called, user adoption marketing. Whereas I believe there's a gap when HR buys, let's say, a talent management software application, or pick a name of a firm. I won't say, but let's just say performance management software. They work very hard to select and figure out which one's the right fit, and they do, I think, an adequate job both on the vendor side and HR of doing the technical requirements and even kind of looking at how the deployment and the technology works. Where I believe that there is a gap is, how do you get users excited, aware, engaged? How do you get 100% adoption? How do you get employees of said performance management application, how do you get them just really excited? And how do you get them to adopt? And so what I have created, and what I am creating over the course of the next couple of years, is just a lot of thought leadership around user adoption marketing. And that's what I'm most excited about. I think over the course of the next 3 years, I want to interact with a lot of the vendors and HR and figure out what models are the most appropriate of how do you really create adoption in a firm? How do you get people excited about software? And whether or not succession management or performance or, whatever, it doesn't matter about what the software is. It's just, how do you communicate to employees why this is important, why you should do it? And it's changing that meter from the have to want to. And that's where I believe kind of the rubber will meet the road in the user adoption marketing is you want users to want to interact with the software. And most of HR is not really thinking about that, and I can tell you the vendor community is not really thinking about that as well, but it's important. And that's kind of where I see a lot of my future is I want to become an expert in user adoption marketing.
Sort of the iPad of of corporate, right? So
yep.
You want to have all of these really cool things that people actually want to use and be a part of and interact with.
That's right. And I think there's models. I definitely don't want to portray that none of the vendor community has seen this, or HR is completely oblivious to this. I don't believe that. I just don't believe there's just a whole lot of dialogue. Like on the front end, let's say the same example of performance management software, there's a lot of dialogue. You Google performance management software, and you're going to see a lot of dialogue about selection. What is the right application? You'll see user groups and message boards and blogs and all kinds of dialogue around selection of the application. You won't see a whole lot of, okay, after you've selected the application, now what? What do you do? And I believe that I think that's a kind of a new frontier for HR is to say, you know what, I've put a lot of emotional, intellectual, and political capital into this purchase. I should follow that up and make sure that we actually use it, and make sure that employees, that have to want to move that needle over and get employees really excited about what we've purchased.
I want to quote from the My Story article on your new website, which is tincup.com.
Sure.
Quote, as much as an outsourced marketing service provider would like to think of himself as being a partner with the client, the truth is he is not at all. Clients are always trying to leverage the relationship they have with their partners. I think every consultant listening to this can identify with that statement. As a matter of fact, one of my partners was telling me last week about a client trying to cherry pick marketing strategy from her. And it seems the larger the organization, the more idea theft they feel entitled to engage in. And what's your experience, and how in this new model that you are now creating, are you going to avoid people just cherry picking your ideas?
Well,
without getting paid,
No, first of all, I think that I want to, when it comes to leverage as it relates specifically to outsourced marketing services, I think that's not a developed market yet, and so I think we're still trying to figure out what are the norms, what should you outsource, what should you always insource, and how should the relationship be between client and vendor. And so I think that I go on to say that kind of it's like the wild wild west, because indeed it really is. With my new model, what I really want, it's like a advice on demand. The way that I have conceptualized it is, I want people to leverage the ideas. So now it's a straight hourly rate. It's $300 an hour. We set up an hour. What I'm going to do is I'm going to probably spend about an hour and a half preparing for the call, reviewing materials, doing all the things that I need to do to actually just be with the client. And then I'm going to give them every possible great idea that I have. And I want them to go and leverage that in whatever way they see fit. Because I actually, instead of trying to change that behavior, Peter, I don't think you can change that behavior. First of all, I think that's a fool's choice. I think that's the way they want to behave. So, okay, well, if you want to behave that way, which is fine, well, here's the deal. Whenever there is a line of prescribe. Okay, so if we just talk shop, like you and I can get on the phone one day and you're like, hey, Will, tell me about this, what about that, and I was thinking about this, and how about that? I'm not really prescribing anything. We're just talking. We're just talking about the market, and I'm getting smarter because of the discussion, and you're getting smarter because of the discussion. I got no issues with that. I'll never have regret for calls like that or interactions like that. But the moment that I start to prescribe, and it's the you need to do ... you need to think about ... I'm prescribing now. I've actually got on a lab coat, and I'm looking at you, and I got a tablet, and I'm prescribing. That's advice. If I've moved to that mode, then I'll probably talk to the person and say, I'm about to get into prescription mode. Are we cool? I mean, is it okay? Because I don't want to have any guilt or regrets. I don't want you to have any guilt or regrets, but I want to invoice you for this. Are we cool? If we're not cool, then I'll know what's in your heart, and that's okay. I'd rather us discuss it as adults and as intellectually, rather than to leave it up to your common sense or your choice. I'll always err on the side of over communicating and saying, hey, listen, before I start prescribing, I want to make sure that we have the right, because we could just talk about the market all day, and I'm game for that, but I'm about to start. I've got a bunch of notes on a tablet. I'm about to prescribe. Why don't we actually set aside a real hour and let me really prepare and really think about you? And then when we're on the phone, we don't have to talk all the chit-chat stuff. We don't have to talk about the market. We've already done that. I feel good about that. We both got those merit badges. Let's just talk about the things that we've already identified, and let me give you great advice. And now you can go on, client. You can go on about your business and feel guilt-free. You don't even have to think about it. It's like, I want people to leverage me in that way. In fact, I think it's smart of people to leverage me that way. So I've created a model around advice on demand where I can talk to people every day, in person or over the phone or whatever. And if it's about that line, that prescribed line, if it's about the market, hey man, we can talk as long as you want to talk. I'm game, because it just makes me smarter and it makes them smarter. At that moment where I'm about to prescribe, I have a little switch in my head that says, I'm about to prescribe. Okay, let me, before I start rattling off the 80 ideas that you need to go execute, let me just talk about that. And I think because I've made, as the website is very transparent, I think what I've created is a model where people understand the brand that we had with Start Tincup, the reason why I left, the logic and all of that. And I've also made what I want to do public, my goals over the next couple of years, and I've made pricing transparent. I've just basically put it all out in front of there and said, you know what? Here's how to interact with me. Here's how to leverage what I know. And here I'm trying to create norms. I'm trying to actually create a way of, hey, listen, here's an actual way to leverage a guy who's smart about the space in these very limited areas. Leverage me. I'm game for that. That's cool. Like, let's do that. But I want to do it, and I want to really focus on the person. I think, as I talk about conversations and advice and things like that, I don't think people, when they're really with another person, very, very seldom do you find someone that's really, really with you. They're thinking about their email or their family or the next call or the thingamabob or, shopping at Costco. They're thinking about something else. And I don't want to do that. I'd rather have less calls and less interactions, but give them everything that I have. And if that means I only have 5 calls a week, great. Then I have 5 calls a week. But I'd like to be in those calls. And I think over time, I think the model will, ebb and flow and change as the market responds to it, et cetera. But
well, I want to expand on that for a minute, William. It's
sure.
The art of the great conversation that you're approaching here. So what are the components and how can you ensure your conversations are truly meaningful, which I think is so important?
Yeah, I think the first thing is making sure that you have expectations for the exchange that you have with one another. So me and Bob are going to get on the phone, and it's like, well, Bob, okay, the logistics of a call is, I think we all know is relatively easy, with Tungle and other types of email, and you can, okay, Tuesday at 3, great, is that Central? Phenomenal, that's pretty easy. Here's the call-in number. But what's harder is actually saying, well, Bob, what do you expect out of the call? Well, what are the roadblocks? Where is the pain? What should I review? What is your expectation for our exchange? And I'm just talking about it. I mean, first of all, the fact that you would talk about what the expectations are already sets you into a different stratosphere, if you will. Then the next thing is preparation. If you actually prepare, and I mean both parties actually. I can't control what the other person does. I can only control what I do, and I'm a preparation nut. So after talking about what the expectations are for an exchange, I'll prepare. I'll do all the things. I've got like a battery of things that I go through when I prepare for something. So I'll go through my little checklist. The other thing is when you're in that conversation with person, Bob, you listen. And you're really, you're not thinking about, once again, a lot of conversations you're thinking about what you're going to say next. And I don't mean that you are. I mean that most people get into a conversation and they want to be clever or they want to be viewed as intelligent or whatever. And so they're thinking about the next thing, the next clever,
right.
thing that they're going to say or the question that they're going to ask, or they're staring at their notes or they're looking at porn or whatever. So they're not really listening.
So they're not listening to you.
Yeah.
They're not paying attention.
They're not paying attention to what's said and also what's not said. And in Texas, we have this little phrase, I hear what you're not saying. And there's something to that, sometimes people will give you all the clues because they'll tell you everything but the important thing that they don't say. And so it's like a little detective, detective fiction, or it's a little show. You have to figure out all the clues and put it all together. I think that the fourth thing is the formation of questions, the ability as an impromptu to ask insightful questions, to actually say, okay, so you've said A, B, and C. What I understand is the pain. Have you thought about, have you done, what about, it's like the asking the probative next questions. And some of that's in preparation, and some of that is just the ebb and flow of the conversation. And so I believe that you have to ask, you got to keep prodding because you only got 60 minutes or so, but you want to kind of keep getting so you get everything that you can possibly get out of that conversation. I think fifth out of 6 is frank dialogue. Some people don't have an orientation towards conflict. They're either passive people or they're just not built that way. They can't call bullshit on something. I have the orientation. I'm pretty good at confrontation and conflict. So when someone says something retarded, I'll say it's retarded. And when someone says something that's just filled with bullshit or holes, I'll actually say it. I'll just tell them, yeah, that's fucking retarded, and here's why. And I don't care of their title or where they went to school or what they're doing next or how many millions of dollars they have. I don't care. And I'm not just saying to be flippant about it like I don't care. I mean, I really just don't care. I'd rather them know that I cared so much that I just told them the truth. And so frank dialogue, both ways. both ways. I can both give it and I can take it as well. And lastly, I think at the end of the phone call, the exchange is the review of action steps. Okay, what did we learn? What about this? We went through that. I know I said A, you said B. What about that? Let's talk about this. It's not next steps as in next sale. It's next steps as in we've just had an exhaustive, time together. Let's just do a quick review. What did we learn? What did we learn? And I think, important to me, because I'm not selling something next. Peter, I don't have a next thingamabob. I don't have like I did with a marketing firm, I don't have a retainer or a project or a scope or a thing to put in front of them as a what's next.
You don't have that upsell script in front of you.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
I've had it and I'm good at it. I don't want it. I actually just want to have that call, be in it with them, and at the end of the call, what I care about is, because I'm not trying to create a churn environment. Like I don't want to have somebody get off the phone and go, yeah, I don't know, it wasn't worth it. I'd rather spend more time with them and make sure that they've got everything that they wanted out of the call. That's more important to me, that at the end of the call we review all the action items and I ask the question, did this meet your expectations? Is there anything else I can do? Are you happy? Will you say nice things about me? And that's important to me. So I think if you book in that conversation with, on the front side, you talk about expectations, and at the end of that conversation or exchange, you talk about satisfaction. You talk about, did I meet, exceed, are you happy, will you say nice things, etc. Then I think I'll have a pretty high success rate of exchanges with people. And I think some of this goes back to something I learned from my grandfather, that you can learn something from every single exchange that you have in life. You're in the elevator, going up to the top floor with somebody, you can learn something from that exchange. It might not be obvious, but you can learn, if you're aware and observant and you try hard enough and you give it its respect, you can learn from every exchange. So, if you look at my career over the next couple of years, I'm going to get really even that much better the more exchanges I have with people. I look at you and what you do for a living, and I look at John Sumser and what he does for a living, and all the wonderful exchanges. Jerry Crispin, you look at these guys and all the wonderful conversations that y'all have every single day, every week. Y'all just get smarter.
Yeah, absolutely. I have learned so much.
Yeah.
I'm doing this show. It's phenomenal. I mean, I knew nothing about recruiting or HR when I started doing this. I came out of marketing and making, corporate rah-rah films for large corporations. I mean, that was my background, in radio, and I didn't know anything about I didn't know what a passive candidate was. I'd never heard that expression when I started doing this, So you're absolutely right. Having these kinds of conversations, if you open your mind to it, you're going to learn a tremendous amount.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that, actually. That's my 40s. You just described my 40s. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with my 50s yet, but that's my 40s right there. That's what I want. That's what I aspire to achieve during my 40s.
And you brought up something that I'd like to talk a little bit about here. It's asking really great questions, because a lot of times when I'm talking to recruiting managers, one of the total disconnects for them is when they ask a candidate, "Do you have any questions for me?" And that candidate goes, "No, not really."
No, you've answered all of them.
Yeah, you've answered all of them. Well, goodbye. Nice meeting you.
No.
See ya.
Well, and some of that, I mean, I ran a very successful internship program at Tincup, and I mean, you're dealing with people in their, late teens and early 20s when you're dealing with somebody, right in their sophomore, junior, senior year of college, and one of the first things I tell them is smile. So, everyone's nervous. In fact, if you're not nervous, you probably shouldn't be there. Everyone's nervous. That's natural. Embrace it. Smile. Just smile at the person first. Second is prepare. I mean, go through the website, Google them, treat it as a two-way street, ask them where they're going to be in 5 years, all the prepare. And in fact, if the person that's recruiting, the person that takes you through the process, maybe they have answered 80% of your questions. That's fine. I actually don't have a problem with that. But you should always have a couple written down on your tablet or whatever, where you can look down and say, you know what, amazing, you have answered 8 out of the 10 questions I had, but I have 2 left. Let me ask you, A and B. The last bit of advice I give interns that are looking for jobs is act like you care. I mean, even if it's an act, but more often than not, when you recruit somebody, you get that ambivalent feel like, well, they could do the job or not do the job, or they care about it, or I didn't get the sense that they wanted it. Now, with the recession now, that obviously has changed a little bit of that dynamic, but, if you really want the position, and I mean, you really, really, really want it, put yourself out there. And I think so much of this is just it's the emotional defense mechanisms at play. You're nervous, you're not prepared, and you don't want to put yourself out there emotionally to be rejected. And so as a candidate, you don't look at the other person and say, listen, I've applied to a lot of stuff, I've looked at a lot of things. This is the job of a lifetime for me. I want you to know when you go to sleep tonight, I actually want this job. Now, you might reject me. That's fine. I'm going to come back in another 6 months or a year or 2 years because this is the job. I want this job. I want you to know that. When you evaluate your candidates and work your process, I want you to know that I actually care and I want this job. Maybe 1 out of 10 candidates says something like that.
Right.
They don't, and it's hell, sales is all about rejection management, and I think as a candidate, there's so much of that is you're being rejected so much that it's just damn near impossible that once you actually do have an interview to put yourself out there emotionally is quite difficult. So I understand why it happens,
right.
But at the same time, you should always prepare. You should always have that great list of questions. And you know what? Even if the person in HR recruiting has taken you and answered a bunch of them, you should still have a couple of them that they have not answered.
Man, that is just terrific advice. I want to return to this outsourced marketing strategy for just a minute, if we could. In reading your new website, it seems to me you believe that outsourcing marketing is wrong because it should be a core competence within an organization, and they should own and control that process. Am I right?
Well, here's the thing. I think where that comes from is, on one level, I would argue that marketing is extremely important. So I'd find myself sitting across from a CEO or whatnot and saying, marketing is so critical. You haven't invested in it. You should be 10% of your revenue. You should actually care. You should invest. Notice I'm using the words, as you remember from your marketing days, I'm not using the words, it's an expense, and you should just do it for shits and giggles. I'm actually saying you should invest in marketing so that you see a return in sales. So on one side, I'd actually argue that, pretty well. I'd argue that you should invest in it. And then I would also argue you should outsource some of that, if not all of that, to a firm like ours, like Tincup. Well, you can't have, hindsight being 20/20, you can't have it both ways. Either marketing is core to a business or it's not. And if it's core, the rules of outsourcing, at least as it's played out over the last 15, 20 years, is if something is truly core to a business, then it should be insourced. If it's not core, then it should be outsourced, or at least thought of in those ways. Getting back to kind of that premise of, I don't think we figured out what to do with marketing. I don't think that has been said. I'm talking really specifically about B2B marketing, and I'm dealing with a segment or a vertical, human capital or people that sell in HR. So I'm not talking about the world and making, generalizations about all marketing everywhere. I'm really specifically talking about the marketing in the space that we're talking about. I think it's all being kind of sorted out, and I couldn't have it both ways. If it is core, then it should be insourced. At least at least the strategic components should be insourced. Tactically, if you want to do email in China or India or through a freelancer or using Elance or hire a subcontractor or do it internally or hire a firm or whatever, well, okay, it's email. Who cares? It goes out. But, your brand promise, your messaging strategy, some of the more strategic initiatives in marketing, I'm not sure that should be outsourced. I don't know, actually.
Yeah.
I'm actually perplexed by it.
I think the 10 people who could have done that were laid off last year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, marketing got gutted. Hell, I'll tell you, when you see recruiters being laid off at Google and Microsoft and things like that, you know you're in for a bad run, because Google and Microsoft, they don't let go of recruiters. They're always recruiting. I mean, at least
right.
Prior to the recession. So that was probably one indicator that we probably all could have and should have picked up on. And the other thing is when you see companies lay off sales staff.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. That's yet another indicator that you're in for a bad run, because if you're going to cut off the sales engine, let's say, and I view marketing in much the same way, because I see it as a catalyst to create and help create sales. So you're right. A lot of people that we've interacted with over the last 2 years, their budget had got halved, or a third of their budget is still left intact, or their entire media budget was completely gutted. It wasn't pretty,
right.
And so that actually creates a more fruitful environment for outsourcing.
And then you add to that the fact that a CMO has a job expectancy of, I think, about 18 months now.
Yeah.
So, why do you think the turnover is so outrageously high in such a critical role as chief marketing officer?
Well, I look at chief marketing officers. I have a lot of dear friends that are CMOs, and I look at them as Division I college football coaches. And we don't really believe in the Joe Paterno, Bobby Bowden models anymore. It is very much a "what have you done for me lately" environment, both in college athletics as well as in marketing. I don't think the C-suite, the rest of the C-suite and or the board gives these guys and gals enough time to do the things that they have to do. A CMO can only make change over the course of time. They can't come in on day one and go, okay, everything you've been doing is, we have to change everything, and then all of a sudden you see the results in 3 months. It doesn't work like that. They have to come in, evaluate, make sure that it's just like a college coach. They have to come in and, if you look at any of the great programs in college football, it just takes a while. It takes 2-3 years of recruiting and using a very consistent game plan and system, both offensive and defensive system, and that's what CMOs have to live with. They have the expectations thrown at them that you've got to make revolutionary change immediately. And I think, once we get out of the recession, I think what you'll see probably with CMOs is they'll not take those jobs. They'll actually, because right now we have to take those jobs, right? But, but I believe what will happen is I think that they're going to become more picky. They're going to say, you know what? I want to go ahead and before we even negotiate the rest of my contract and start date and all that other stuff, I want to negotiate my budget. And I want to negotiate what are the expectations. Let's start talking about that. Before I say yes to this and what we need to do, let's commit to a 3-year plan. Let's create a 4-year plan, and let's do it together with the other members of the C-suite or even the board. Let's commit to a long-term strategy. And I mean long-term as 3 and 4 years. You don't have to, get married to somebody, for 10, 20, 40 years, but, give the person enough time to actually create change. It's like they used to say at Walmart, give the people the tools and the resources to be successful, and 90% of the people will be successful.
I think that's really smart because, so many of these people go into these jobs with the expectation that, well, we want you to come in and really shake things up and really change things and, yada, 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 and they get in there and of course they don't want anything changed.
No.
And guess what? You don't have a budget to change anything anyway, and so they're stuck, right?
Yeah, you still have the expectations. You still have, and I say unreasonable expectations because I actually believe that. I think that the expectations that are levied on CMOs 9 times out of 10 are an unwinnable game, an untenable situation.
It's fantasy land.
It is Fantasyland.
You know, we want you to make us the greatest thing on the face of the earth, and you've got 10 cents to do it with.
Yeah, and my brother-in-law is on your marketing staff, and we will never fire him. And keep going with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets worse. That's the good news is you have 10 cents for budget. It gets worse because either you don't have people, or the people you have are retarded, or you can't fire them, or whatever. So it's like. And really, I use the college athletics or college football kind of as a scenario because I see a lot of that. I mean, you see a coach come in and they want to put in a system and they get yanked out after a year or 2 years. It's like, yeah, I understand they went 5-7. Well, you know what? That's actually good news. The fact that they won 5 times, shocking. You weren't supposed to win 5 times. You have this immediate success, and then I think, or you're expected to have immediate success and completely change things. And I feel for a lot of the CMOs, and I think right now a lot of those gals and those guys are taking the gigs because they, let's be honest, they need to take the gigs.
Right. But back to our earlier conversation, they have mortgages, they have kids in college, they got bills to pay. You got to take the gig.
Yeah, you got to take the gig. Now, there's a moment where they don't have to take the gig, and I believe there's enough dialogue. Actually, there's enough great online communities and kind of an info sharing between that group that they're learning. They're getting smarter, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. They're getting smarter about negotiating a better situation for themselves in the future. And I think once that talent needle moves back over to where you want to go and hire that CMO, that really badass CMO, well, you know what? That person's going to come in with a list of things, not demands, but a list of things that will create a microclimate for success. And they know it. And they're going to sit down with the board and the selection committee, and they're going to say, yeah, I get it. You like me, I like you. We both like each other. That's cool. Here's the 10 things I need for this to be successful. We either figure out these 10 things or I go on to the next thing. It's nothing personal. But I'm not going to put myself in a situation where it's unwinnable. Have a nice day.
It's a whole onboarding process that I've talked with George Pratt about a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so important.
Yeah.
Because then you're really setting up the expectations for everyone.
Yeah, everybody wins there, and I think first of all we're making these big generalizations like as if some of these CMOs haven't done this, but we both know that there are a lot of smart women and men that hold these positions that already do all that. Right. But by and large, when you're dealing with a recession and a talent situation that we have, if they have a CMO, if a company has a CMO and they're hiring now, they're in that it's like I had a professor tell me one time in negotiations, you're either negotiating from a position of strength or a position of weakness. Period of the story, and you should know which one you're in. It's like if you're ever in a conference room, and there 5, 10 other people in there. If you can't identify who the weak link is, the weak link's you. So I think that right now we're dealing with an era of CMOs that are probably have negotiated jobs out of positions of weakness, and that's okay. That'll come full circle as everything in life does, and they will once again be negotiating from positions of strength, and in doing so, they'll probably create more favorable conditions for themselves.
Well, William, this has really been a fun conversation. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to share with the audience?
I went through this very cathartic process over the month of July, and I put everything out there in front of people, which there's going to be mixed feelings and results from that because I am strategically putting myself out there in a more transparent way around pricing and around what I want to achieve in the future. And so I think anybody that's in kind of a moment like this, that where they're looking at where they've been and they're setting up kind of their next goals, and I think there's a lot of gals and guys that get to that moment in their 30s to 50s, let's say, and they have that life is too short conversation with themselves. I think go to the website. If nothing else, it is an exercise in me being very transparent. And no, Peter, you're an excellent interviewer. So no, there wasn't any questions that you didn't ask. You explored, everything super appropriately.
Well, let's do this. Let's take up this conversation in 6 months, because I'd love to see where you're at in 6 months from now, and what kinds of things you're working on.
I'd love that as well, and hopefully we'll see each other at some of the HCI events and things like that.
Great.
Well, this is very exciting. I mean,
it is exciting. I think it's very cool. And I think this whole idea of transparency, and this is something I was talking to Penelope Trunk about a couple of weeks ago.
She's brilliant.
And, she was talking about that they are about at Brazen to Careers to publish, at least internally, everyone's salaries, so everyone knows what everyone is making.
Brilliant.
Which is brilliant, absolutely. And, and I think that's the way it should be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know what? It's like Brett and I, every year, usually about every 9 months, we would sit down with every employee and plot out where we were going as a company and ask them if they were on board. So we'd basically ask for a commitment. Every 9 months, we'd sit in the wipe-off board conference room, and we'd look at them and say, we're going here. This is why. This is what we're thinking. Are you with us? And that's not an indictment. If you're not with us, that's okay. It doesn't mean we want you to run into a tree or anything. It's, are you with us on this journey? And if you are, great. Let's commit to each other. Let's commit. And without fail, Peter, every single time we do that, we'd have a person look at us and go, you know what? No, not really. Great. Well, let's figure out, what do you need to do next? How do we make this graceful? How can we help each other out? What are you really excited to do? Who do we know? How can we get you on to what you're doing next? And we didn't treat it as, like a way to, like a mechanism to try and convince them or manipulate them into buying into the vision. It's like, no, that's cool. I'm glad that we actually talked.
That's so smart to do that.
How do we help each other? And the same thing with pay. I mean, the thing about pay is, with employees especially, is they're going to be curious. In fact, you can't stop the curiosity. That just won't happen. It's unnatural to think that people are just not going to be curious about other people's salary. So why not just, there's going to be fallout. And I know they know that. There's going to be fallout because at one point Timmy looks over and sees Jane and says, Jane's making $5,000 more than me. I need to expect more out of Jane. Jane's got to be pulling more of her weight.
Yeah, because now you're setting up a whole new series of accountabilities within departments and staffs and expectations. If you're going to be making $5,000 more than me, you better be performing like you're making $5,000 more than me.
That's right. And you know what? That's fair. If the market is saying that you're worth $5,000 more, then you should be adding $5,000 more worth of value. I mean, that's only fair. If the market is saying that you're worth $5,000 more, then you should be adding $5,000 more worth of value. I mean, that's only fair. So I think, first of all, it's brilliant. There will no doubt be what we call the foreseen versus the unforeseen. There will no doubt be fallout. That's life, but it's a worthy pursuit. It's a noble pursuit that they're undertaking, and I absolutely love them. So I think they're doing it the right way, and you know what? They're at least going to be able to talk about that with other people too. Yep. You know what I mean? Yep. Like it's like, hey, we went through this, and here's why we did it, and here's what we've learned from it, and that's okay. Yeah,
something else that Penelope said to me, which I think is so true. She's like, the music of Gen Y sucks. They're not really all that creative, but man, are they innovative when it comes to managing their careers? And I think that's really true.
Yeah, they are, and I've learned in managing a lot of Gen Y that a lot of it is like I wrote actually for Corn on the Job for his blog back in December. I wrote a 20 tips for 20-somethings, and it's basically here's the things that you should know about marketing, advertising, and PR, and how to get a job. And I had to really evaluate the last 10 years of working with 20-somethings. Like, they're not like me. I was born in '68. And I have the work ethic of my father, and the brutality, the honest brutality of my father as well. And a lot of 20-somethings can't handle that. They can't. They can work. They want to work differently. That's okay. Right. That's different. But they can't handle the brutal critique because they've never been in an environment where they've had to critique something else, or they understand the essence of critique. Like, I'm not trying to tear you down. I'm just giving you feedback. Feedback can be positive or negative. It can be constructive or positive reinforcement. But they don't get that. They just see you tearing them apart, and they don't like you. Like, they just shut down. It's like, okay, well, as a manager, I've got to figure out a way to deliver the content, but now I got to do it differently. Yeah. Because if the person's just going to shut down, your message isn't going to be received. No one wins.
I'm the parent of a 22-year-old daughter, and as she was growing up, every time she entered a contest, she always got a trophy, whether she won or she didn't, right? And it was always constant positive reinforcement. Oh, you're doing a great job, blah, blah, blah. And I think some of that was really a disservice, because that's not how the real world works. I mean, if you fail, you don't get a trophy. In the real world.
Well, this is the job market, right?
Yeah.
This is the job market that a lot of the 20-somethings are having to come to grips with. That college per se doesn't really set you up for the job market.
No, it doesn't.
And I'll tell you, I'm a person of a bachelor's degrees and 2 master's degrees, and I look across the table at a 20-something that's getting their BA and something or another, and it's like, listen, you basically have a GED. So and I know this is going to be hard. You just graduated or will graduate from a prestigious school with a great degree. You're like when I graduated with a GED. You're the equivalent, and it sucks. But now know that in your college career and augment that with great cooperative experience, internships, and experiential learning where you actually learn how the real world is. And I think the more that these kids actually get out there and interact with the real world, the more they find out that stuff before they enter the job market. Like I was interacting with over Facebook with one of my former interns. She's at Wake Forest, and she interned with us in her sophomore year, then went to London, did an internship in London, did another internship in the spring. She was at Frito-Lay this past summer, and she's going into her senior year, I think, if I looked at her resume, with 5 internships under her belt. So when she enters the job market, she's already going to be on a trajectory that most of her peers just aren't on. They're going to have to go out and kind of have to, basically take the first 4 or 5 years of their career to kind of figure out, what do I do and what do I like and how what am I good at, and all that bumping around. They're going to have to figure all that stuff out, and the more you can kind of lessen that gap between what the real world is actually like and where you're going to flourish, the better.
We've been speaking with William Tincup. You can find him on tincup.com and also in the Career Transition channel of Total Picture Radio. That's totalpicture.com. We'd welcome your comments and opinions on today's show. Visit William's feature page and voice your opinion. We'd like to thank Jobs and Pods for sponsoring our show today. Visit jobsandpods.com to learn how you can join other winning brands attracting the best talent. And remember, you can subscribe to Total Picture Radio and Jobs and Pods on iTunes and everywhere podcasts are found. This is Peter Clayton. Thank you for tuning in to Total Picture Radio, the voice of career and leadership acceleration.